Hi, I'm Angel, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Muzak. In this episode, we'll be talking about my latest album, Eternal Home, under the Fire-Toolz moniker. It's a double LP, and it's also available on CD and cassette and digitally, and there's also an instrumental version that's available on CD and cassette and digitally. It was released by my favorite label in the whole world, House Mountain, who I've been working with since my second album, on and off, but mostly on. It's available now. If you want to pick it up, I'll put links in the description. On several occasions over the past month, I asked my followers on Instagram to submit questions that I could answer in this video, and a good portion of you paid no attention to the prompt and asked questions that had nothing to do with Eternal Home, but I should have expected that, and I don't really care, and I'm just going to answer them all anyway. So let's get right to it. The first question I have is from Nevada Nate. Is the 4-disc separation intentional? Are there themes? They're not really 4 discs. There's just 2 records, and the CD version is just 1 CD. I know that you're referring to the 4 different sections, and I named each section. I would say the themes are loose. Each of the names of the sections are very intentional and have a deep meaning.
Gateless X1 is referring to my album Skinless X1, and the Gateless Gate, which is a collection of Zen koans. Amygdala mandala is a compound term referring to a mass of gray matter in our brains associated with feeling emotions, and an illustrated configuration of symbols in ancient Eastern traditions representing one's spiritual journey, respectively. Interfaith fatigue is kind of self-explanatory. I am an interfaith person, and sometimes that shit can get confusing. Home for now is a phrase that, when I first heard it, shocked me into surrendering to the uneasiness that comes with knowing that I am probably not where I am going to be forever, and relaxing into that. Everywhere I am, at all times, is home.
But really what I wanted to do was pick a good order for the songs regardless, and then I just divided them up into 4 according to how much material would fit on each side of a record. And I wouldn't say that the first bunch of songs necessarily are entirely relevant to that section's title. I would say that really any of the songs could have fit in any of the 4 sections, but I think part of my work and part of my art is not just the music and not just the lyrics, but the titles, and I really just wanted an excuse to use more words and put more words on the cover and put more message out there. In my last video, somebody asked me if there was any significance to the words in parentheses in each of the song titles on my album Field Whispers. And like I said then, really the only reason was that I just wanted to say more stuff. I wanted longer titles. I wanted more words out there to represent the music. I also just really like prog, and a lot of old prog bands would often have these long albums, and they would give each of their songs a Roman numeral and create this concept, and they would name the different sections of the album, and it's really just kind of a nerdy thing. Fate's Warning comes to mind, their album A Pleasant Shade of Grey, and Rush did it. That's really all that is. It's not really that each of the 4 sections on the album are necessarily described by the name of the section they appear in. I really don't plan things out that conceptually. I wouldn't say any of my albums are concept albums because I'm just not organized enough to really plan something like that out from the start and then commit to it and then create an album that fits into that narrative. I really just kind of make whatever I want to make, and then I look at it at the end and I try to organize it and name things and stuff like that. To answer your question about are there themes, there are, but it's more of like a hologram. Like each piece sort of projects this whole world, and all of the worlds sort of overlap. Nevada Nate also asked the question, what is the size difference between the small and large fanny pack? Well, at the time you asked this question, I didn't think there was a difference, and I thought that was kind of a mistake in the listing. So I talked to Doug from House Mountain, and it turns out there are 2 different sizes, and they're based on the strap length. And I don't really know offhand the length of the strap, but I think that the listing has been amended to reflect that. Isaac McCoon, I don't know if I said that right, asks, are most the double kicks done on live drums? Some sound programmed, but I can't tell. Why do you care? But to answer your question, most of the drums are programmed on the album, but a few of the songs have live drums, and those songs definitely have double kick in them. I've been playing drums my whole life, and although I'm extremely rusty, I was practicing double kick really early on. I remember the first time I heard double kick in a song, it was on this Firehouse song called Lover's Lane, and it really confused me because I didn't understand in my head how somebody could do that with one foot. And my dad told me that the drummer actually had two bass drums, and it freaked me out. I got this picture in my head of somebody with three legs because I know that you use one foot for the hi-hat. And I was like, wait, how is that possible? How do you have two bass drums? You can't even use them. And my dad was like, oh, well, you just move your feet around to different pedals and use what pedals you want to use in that moment. I've been really big on double kick since I was really young. And like I said, I'm very rusty. But one thing I think I've maintained like fairly well is like a pretty good control over the way my two legs and my 2 feet sort of work together. There was a point in my life where my feet were just as good as my hands as far as like, you know, rudiments and different fills and stuff like that. I've always wondered why people really care if something's programmed or not. I mean, I guess it's cool to know if somebody has the physical ability to pull off something. I guess it's a lot easier to make it happen on the computer, but to me it doesn't really matter because the end result is the whole point of it, and I don't really think that the value of someone's work should be measured based upon what they're able to physically do with their body versus what they're able to come up with on a computer. Now, I'm not accusing you of any of those things. I don't know why you asked. And to be frank, I am kind of interested in the answer to that question in a lot of cases. I mean, it doesn't really change the value of the art, but I guess it's cool to know how someone made it. So I can appreciate that question in that way. I do just kind of feel strongly that the end result is the end result. And that's all that really matters. However, I have to admit, I do sense some defensiveness in my own response, which you can probably sense as well. It's not really because I don't want anybody to think that I can't do fast double kick. It's more so that I kind of feel for a lot of the electronic musicians out there that are looked down upon because they use samples or because their drums are programmed rather than physically performed. A lot of people sort of push artists like that aside and sort of consider them to not be real musicians or not be as talented because of the ways they create their music. There's a lot of music YouTubers out there that I personally enjoy most of the time that talk a lot of crap about artists that rely on electronics and MIDI and sequencing and stuff like that. But they're usually older people who grew up with, you know, classic rock and jazz and stuff like that. So I guess I can kind of understand where they're coming from. My friend Nick, actual Nick Kruger, asked, this is not a question about Eternal Home. Of course it isn't. But I love you. You are a really great friend, and I love talking to you about spirituality and philosophy, and the music videos you make are absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait until you're finished with the music video you're working on for me right now for my song Progressive Path. It is turning out to be my favorite music video I've ever had, and I just can't wait for it to be out there. L. Coates, or I Coates, I'm not sure what character that is, asks, do you do vocal warm-ups for screams, singing, or no vocal warm-ups? I don't usually do any vocal warm-ups for screams because I can sort of make that sound with my throat at any time, unless I have like a sore throat or something. It's not that hard. It's not really belching out. It's more like I'm squishing my vocal cords up in my neck, or at least that's kind of how I think of it. I sort of let out this staticky shriek sound, and it doesn't really require very much of a warm-up. I do kind of need to continuously drink liquid as I perform, lubricate my vocal cords, but I don't really need to do much preparation. For singing, I could probably do more vocal warm-ups, but usually what happens is I just record take after take until it starts to sound good, and the first bunch of takes I record are the warm-ups, I guess. Brother Tiger, who is one of my favorite current musicians and makes some of the best music I've ever heard, asks, are you using any 90s digital synths on it? Sure sounds like it. Well, they're all digital emulations, like on my computer, but yes, I use the shit out of the M1 and the Wave Station. My project, Non-Local Forecasts, is pretty much made up only of those synths, but in Fire-Toolz, I use them a lot, along with some others like Alchemy and really a huge handful of others that I just use a little bit here and there. When I'm writing a new song, really the first synth that I want to go to most of the time is the M1. My friend Faye, who is Trust Fund Ozu, one of my favorite drummers and favorite people of all time, asks, which tracks were the first and last to be recorded? Also, hi. Hi, Faye. Oh, let's see. First and last to be written and recorded. Well, it's hard to say because I work on all of my songs at one time. I sort of jump back and forth between them all and tweak them until they're complete. I'm trying to remember which ones I started first, but I can't really remember. I think there are a few songs that were started a long time ago that I never thought would see the light of day. I never thought I would actually complete. They really came from me digging in the archives and trying to find old scraps. And those songs were World of Objects, which is last on the album. And then the track Advaita Shuffling. Those were both things that I messed with a long time ago and just never finished. And that's rare for me. I don't usually do that. I usually just finish everything I work on pretty quickly, but I could never get them to a point where I really liked them. And when I was working on Eternal Home, I pulled them back out and changed a bunch of stuff, and they evolved to where they are today. As far as the last song I made before the album was complete, that's really hard to say. I really just have no idea, honestly. I work on them all at the same time. I will sit down to work on music, pick a random song, open it, listen to it, see if there's anything I want to do, maybe do a few things or not, and then I close it, and I just kind of open up another one and see if there's anything I want to do, and it just keeps on going like that until the songs are done. Zave, I'm going to make that a long A. Zave asked, how do you know when the project is done? How that fits into length format? Whatever have to cut musics. I think I know what you're asking. So as far as knowing when a project is done, I don't know. It's just kind of intuitive. I mean, I just work on it until it feels done. I mean, there's no criteria. There's no formula. It's just a feeling. It's just a sound. And I guess you're asking how that fits into like length format constraints. Yeah, I mean, the length and the format of the release is definitely a factor. If I'm working on a song and I know I only have 5 minutes left that'll fit on this record, I will just intentionally make sure that song doesn't get too long. There's really no secret. Power Frames asks, when writing a song, what do you usually start with instrumentation-wise? Drums, a melody, a riff? All sorts of different things. I'll usually open up a new project and go into my archive of sounds I've already recorded or gathered, and I'll just scroll through them until something sparks an idea. I'll drag it into the project and just start messing around. I don't really have a real formula for this. Power Frames also asked, did you ever get into Mew? Oh, yes, I got into Mew. Their album Frengers is a favorite of mine, and The Glass-Handed Kites is really amazing too. I got to see them when they were touring on that album, which was just overwhelmingly beautiful. And then I forget what the name of the album is after that. I really did enjoy that, but for some reason I had lost my like fiery passion for the band around that time because I was just listening to other stuff. I've never heard anything by Mew I didn't like though. Demophilia says, New Alice Gas, Hardcore Heaven 909, Worldwide Hardcore Will Never Die. Something Art says or asks, are you inspired by sources like literature, visual art, or do you find the most inspiration through process/life? I don't know, kind of all of the above. I mean, I've never really seen an art piece and needed to go make a song. Listening to audiobooks will always prompt me to pick up a notepad or go in my note app on my phone and take down ideas. I do that all the time, actually. I can't listen to any audiobook at all without taking some kind of notes or coming up with lyrics. Literature doesn't really inspire the music part necessarily. The things that inspire the music part are other music, but also nature and sensory memories and personal experiences and the emotions that come along with that, everything from grief and trauma to joy and awe. It's hard to say what actually inspires the music part, because the way I come up with things these days is just picking up an instrument and messing around until things start to sound good. I don't often experience something that directly fuels this idea for a song. I say this in every video I make. Pretty much all of my music these days is just the result of screwing around with sounds and ideas until this vision starts to form, and I just build on it until it's finished. Eli Slimeberg asks, do you record at the same time you compose? Do you make a map beforehand, or do you make one as you go? There's no such thing as a map in my process. I usually record and compose at the same time. When I'm playing in bands and stuff, it's not really like that, but when I'm making music solo, that's pretty much the way to go. The idea of making a map beforehand is really overwhelming to me. It feels discouraging. I absolutely hate planning something and then having to stick with that. It's the worst. I need that freedom to just go wherever my heart wants to go in that moment. Eli also asks, if you were to create a physical installation to embody the record, what would it include? No, I don't know. That's not possible. I really have no idea. Zuckerbot01010 asks, your favorite sound on Eternal Home? Favorite sound. I really like the synth patch at the beginning of Senpa Indicator Light. And I really like that guitar riff that comes in. I like that beat too. It's pretty cool. I really like the synths in Oddcat Sanctuary during the first part of the song. There's a plugin I use called Lossy by Good Hertz. I use that on several of the sounds on the album, and it gives this jittery, glitchy sound to things. I used it on the opening voice soundbite on the album. I used it on a little clip of my sister saying something in the drone part of Oddcat Sanctuary. I also used it at the very end of the album, the little atmospheric nature sound. This is a really hard question. I mean, there are so many different sounds and so many different songs on the album that things don't really stand out to me that much. If one thing starts to stand out to me, I just think about another song and it gets covered up. I am never one to pick favorites of anything. I hate making top 10 lists. I hate making any kind of... I hate ranking things.
I also hate using the word hate so much.
Everything just needs everything else in order to be what it is. I guess I can understand why other people like to do that, but that's just not how my mind works. My friend who runs Ripped Girl Jeans, which is a fantastic niche meme account on Instagram, and he's working on a zine that he just interviewed me for. He asks, I've been wondering about those drums. Programmed, right? They sound so fucking good. Yeah, I already answered this question. I will say that if I had to come up with a percentage of the drums on the album that are programmed, I would say probably like 90%. And then the rest of the drums I recorded in a studio called Jam Deck in Chicago. And I just recorded a bunch of improv, really. I had the engineer set a tempo, and I just played and improved, and then I had him do some preliminary mixing, and then he sent me the tracks, and then I would just bring some of them into a song and then start writing around them. I did this on the song Off to Las Vegas. Music for 18 Magicians asks, what's your ideal breakfast? Well, my ideal breakfast is my cat that passed away a few years ago. Her name is Breakfast, and a lot of my album Rainbow Bridge was sort of about her or based on concepts relating to her passing, different philosophical or spiritual contemplations and things like that. My ideal food breakfast, I don't know, I'm a sucker for just plain American breakfast food. I mean, I love IHOP and Denny's and all that kind of crap. It's a huge comfort to me. My friend Davey didn't follow the prompt so much that he not only asked a question unrelated to Eternal Home, but he also just sent me a DM with the question. But I love you, Davey. You're one of my favorite people. I played drums on his latest album as The Christmas Bride. I played drums on 2 songs. So look up The Christmas Bride from Chicago. It's like a progressive skate punk album, I guess you could say. It's pretty crazy and nutty and really enjoyable and fun and funny. Davey asks, how is your not so new home affecting your music making? Well, my new home is definitely affecting my life at all times, but I've always kind of felt like I could just make music anywhere under any circumstances, and I always have. I mean, I've made entire songs sitting in my car on breaks between shifts at work before. I used to walk dogs, and I would take my laptop with me, and when I didn't have a dog to walk for a half hour, I would just park somewhere and plug my laptop into the speakers and work on music. Occasionally, people would like knock on my window and be like, hey, what is that? What are you listening to? And I would tell them like, oh, this is my music. I'm working on a song. It doesn't really matter what's going on. It doesn't even matter if life is absolute chaos. If you just give me a 15-minute chunk, I can start working on a song, and I can get some good ideas down. Handped Dunkton asks, how come? Husk Recordings asks, is that a ping pong ball being hit in I Am a Cloud? Yes. It definitely is. It's a sample of a ping pong ball being hit. Trulin96 asks, what should I get? Eternal Home CD or vinyl? Sound and design-wise. Well, a CD is digital. It's extremely clean, and the sound quality is preserved. It's 16-bit versus 24 or something higher, so that does affect the quality, but probably not in a way that you would ever notice. Vinyl and cassette, but even more so vinyl, completely trashes the sound quality, in my opinion. I mean, I know people will defend to the death the warm analog sound of vinyl, but in my opinion, vinyl sounds like shit. Vinyl sounds like shit. I like vinyl as a novelty. It's really enjoyable to listen to records. It's really enjoyable to put a record on a record player and put the needle down and listen to it. And there is a lot of music out there that does take to the vinyl format pretty well. Warm music in general does, but my stuff is really kind of cold and hi-fi a lot of times, and you have to produce a different master to work with vinyl, and that compromises the sound quality because the high end has to be tweaked a little bit, and you can't really get as much sub bass on a record, or you'll throw the needle off its track. And really, vinyl is just a huge compromise, and I release it because it's beautiful and people love it, but I just don't understand how anybody could say that the sound of vinyl is like better than digital or CD. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's a compromise. It's a huge compromise. Vinyl adds distortion. No matter what you do, it's distorting the audio. It might be such a small amount that you don't notice. It might be in such a way that feels sort of easier on your ears. Really, if I had my wish, I would just be selling USB sticks or something, because digital files are the most accurate representation of what I create. I mean, I sit here for hours and hours and hours to like tweak my songs to get them as perfect as I feel I can get them. And then they get pressed onto vinyl and then it all gets screwed up. So it's just like, you know. So yeah, buy the CD. Please buy the CD. Actually, no, download the files. Put them on your phone. Get a decent pair of headphones, plug them in, listen to them that way. That's really what my music is meant to be experienced with. A pair of headphones from a digital device. Chronos Expo says, a reimagining of the 1980s horror film Sweet Home. Not sure what you're asking. I haven't seen that. I don't really like horror movies. I don't really enjoy watching people get tortured and killed and ripped apart. I feel like that's kind of sick. I don't really understand horror movies. There are a handful of horror movies I do actually like because they're either really campy or I saw them when I was young and have seen them so many times to the point where the traumatization is already there and I'm sort of desensitized to it and I know what's going to happen. Oh, this guy's going to get his head chopped off in about 2 seconds, so I'm like prepared for it. I know I'm an odd person out here. I'm not saying that all my friends who like horror movies are a bunch of sociopaths, but I just can't understand how something so terrible, so upsetting is just entertaining. I just don't get it. Like, go watch the news. Chronos Expo also asks, a meditation on Fun Home by Bechtel. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. Part-timer says or asks, how does it feel reading all the different reviews after having spent so much time on it? Oh, it's really awesome. I kind of love reading reviews. I don't know. I'm really grateful that I don't really get very many bad reviews. And if I do, I usually understand where people are coming from because my music is like fairly difficult for a lot of people to sit back and enjoy because there's so much going on and it goes in so many different directions at a time. The only thing that really bugs me about the reviews, well, two things really. One of them is when they say stuff that's just like not factual. It's just not true. They like make these assumptions that I guess are opinions of theirs or suspicions of theirs, but they're just not factual. So it's just kind of annoying that that stuff gets published. And then the other thing I don't really like is when reviews are kind of lazy and people are just like, oh, this is just 100 gecs, but vaporwave or something like that. It's just like, have you really listened to it at all? Do you just hear me like yelling and you hear like some electronic beats and some synths, so you just all you can think of is 100 gecs? So that's a little annoying, but I probably do that too. When I hear something that I haven't been very exposed to before and I don't really have a big frame of reference. Hieroglyph asks, did The Chariot make more than one good album? This is hard to answer because part of me wants to say they didn't make any good albums. And the other part wants to say that no, they didn't make more than one good one because their first one is my favorite one because it's really sloppy and really bad and I just kind of love it based on the novelty. But I revisited it not too long ago and I was like, gosh, this is really bad. Like they seem like they were just kind of being like playfully nihilist about it. And I think the story behind that band is that Josh left Norma Jean and he was still contractually obligated to Solid State Records, so he had to like form another band and release a record to fulfill that obligation. And I think that's part of the reason why the album's just so sloppy and seems so rushed. But then they got really popular and I think they started making like much more refined music that was like a lot tighter, better recorded and stuff like that. But I didn't really like that stuff because I was really just into their crazy, sloppy, noisy mayhem type stuff. I saw them a few times after they released that first release and the live shows were just chaotic. They were just throwing themselves around, throwing their guitars around the stage, crashing into each other. It was just like feedback and just like they were barely playing. And I love that. That's so fun. I love stuff like that. Bane Bits of Vinyl says, opposed to remixes? No, not at all. I love remixes. I love when people remix my stuff. I release remix albums sometimes. My Rainbow Bridge album is actually being remixed by a bunch of different friends, and I'm going to put that album out digitally probably sometime in December. Every song is going to get 2 remixes from 2 different people. I think that remixes are really underrated. I think people don't really care about them that much, it seems. Every time I release some kind of remix release, it barely gets any attention. It barely gets any downloads compared to the studio stuff, and that's understandable. Please remix my stuff. If you ever want any of the stems to any of my songs, just ask me. I'll probably send them to you. I'll let you remix them. If you wanted to sell them or put them on an album or put them on streaming or something, I would probably appreciate splitting the revenue with you, but I'm pretty liberal about that stuff, so please have at it. Encrypt.wave asks, when you are going for a new key part and you want to write key bass, what's the first thing you reach for? Depends on the song. I really love the fretless bass patches in the M1. I use fretless bass a lot. But I also like a really sort of distorted synth bass sound with like a really sharp high end to it. I can find a lot of those sounds in Alchemy. There's a bunch of cool stuff in Wave Station. Sometimes I'll just reach for my own 5-string short scale bass. There's not really a go-to method. It really just depends on the song and what kind of sound I think is going to fit. Sometimes I just reach for a really plain like sine wave bass if I don't really want it to sound defined and I just want it to provide the low end. That's it for this video. I know that it didn't really give you any kind of like big perspective on what Eternal Home is about.
Do you all really care that much about gear and merchandise? Do you not care what the songs are about? Are the lyrics and experiences behind them just arbitrary to you? Were none of you even wondering what the album title means?
And I may or may not do another video on this album. There's so much more to say. I mean, I didn't even really touch on hardly anything here. I just wanted to honor your questions and ease your curiosities and create some content in the process. I hope you enjoyed this. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would really like to utilize YouTube more.
And because it takes me almost 3 or 4 entire days to put one of these together, which basically cuts my income in half for a week, you are welcome to donate to my Venmo or Cash App.
I really want to post more music videos. I try to do as many music videos as I can or as I can afford. I have spent far more on music videos for Eternal Home than I will ever make back in sales. It's kind of stupid. It's like one huge loss for me, but it's also a huge gain because I love music videos and I love representing my music with visual artifacts. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks again, and peace.